the whole reptilian versus Anunnaki thing is starting to make a lot of sense. So, of course, some people probably don't know who the Anunnaki is. So, of course, I might be going off on a tangent right now, and some of you are like, what in the fuck is he talking about? So, I want to first give you guys a background story of what the Anunnaki is. The Anunnaki is said to be our creators of man. They're said to be our creators of man, derived from the Nephilim. The Nephilim was here before us. The Nephilim were said to be the giants, as you will. So once the giants rebelled against the Anunnaki, they created us. Once they removed the Nephilim, or should I say, we removed the Nephilim, the birth and creation of us started to come. Okay? So I'm going to play here a clip that breaks down a little bit more of who the Anunnaki might be for you guys. And then we're going to get into some other things because, like I said, this is going to be a wild one. So this is pretty much the introduction of who the Anunnaki is and who they are to us. Like I said, they are the creators of humanity. Matter of fact, before I even play that clip, I would like to go over here. Let's go on over here to the actual wiki right here so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So it even says right here, the Anunnaki, Sumerian, also transcribed as Anunnaki, Anunnaki, Anoa, Anunnaki, and other variations, are a group of deities of the ancient Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. Now, you've heard those before, especially the Babylonians. If you think about, I think Stargate, right? It's crazy how they had a show called Stargate, right? And it's literally about this portal underneath a base that, you can travel throughout different times and space continuum, right? Stargate. Said to be a actual Stargate underneath Antarctica. Again, we'll get into that later on. In the earliest Sumerian writings about them, which come from the post-Akkadian period, the Anunnaki are deities in the pantheon descendants, of An and Ki, the god of the heavens and goddess of the earth. So think about that. The god of the heavens and goddess of earth. Literally, they are, if you want to think about who is God and we think about who's in heaven, I should say, there you go right there. The goddess of heavens and the goddess of earth. They're literally in charge of us. And their primary function was to decree the fates of humanity. They should not be confused with the Apkallu. So, literally, says it right there. Decree the fates of humanity. Okay, so if we're talking about God versus the devil, we really pretty much are talking about the Anunnaki versus the reptilians. If we're thinking about it, if we're talking about where the supposed devil even derives from, right? That would be from underground, the serpent, if you will, right? Reptilians. But when you think about light, okay, energy, you think Anunnaki. Again, if we're talking about God versus the devil, we're actually talking about Anunnaki versus the reptilian race. So, well, not the reptilian race, but we're talking about the reptilians that actually run the world, the politicians, if you will. So, let me play here, like I said, the clip that explains a little bit more to you guys of who the Anunnaki is. Like I said, I understand that this one will probably be the least watched. I understand that this might be the most watched. But like I said, I've also noticed that Drake seems to get more attention on this channel than the actual truth for some reason. But I noticed the truth actually entertains y'all more, which is a very weird concept. It's a very weird concept. Very, very weird concept. Drake gives the views, but this content lives on the channel. I don't understand it whatsoever. But all right, so without further ado, let's get into the Anunnaki.
Cycles and what's now modern-day Iraq. After all, here are just some of what they gave us. The modern calendar, based on lunar cycles, the 60-20 counting system used for geometry and measuring time, the wheel, the plow, irrigation systems like levees and canals, sailboats, They even spoke the first known language. And, most importantly, they left evidence of the first recorded writing. That's a lot of intelligent contributions to humanity. So why aren't we taught more about this clearly advanced and influential civilization? Well, connect the dots and you'll discover why the omission could be deliberate. Sumerians were accurate in creating many advanced systems, yet we dismiss their history of man as mere mythology. And why is that? Well, if we gave the same credibility to their written history as we've given their inventions, we'd be teaching a completely different version of our origins. And we'd be thinking a lot more about what our future may hold. So let archaeologists continue to debate the history and evolution of man. If you go to the source, here's what the first civilization ever to record history revealed about our past. In 1849, a British archaeologist discovered 14 tablets in Sumeria. To date, these are the oldest known writings, and they date back to the 24th century BC. While the stories on them share much of what other ancient writings say, they put a whole new spin on the other ancient sacred texts. You see, while they do refer to a father of all beginnings, or some kind of ultimate supreme being, the tablets say that the creators in Genesis, the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, these were polytheistic gods of ours, otherworldly beings, or just plain out, they were aliens. The entire first two tablets explain who they were and where they were from. Tablet 3 tells of the 6 days of creation, or settlement, on Earth. Later, they explain how the human race was genetically manipulated by these beings and did not evolve randomly. Even the technology Sumerians gave us came from these beings. Are you interested now in knowing more about what the Sumerians had to say about our history? Here are selected legends from the 14 tablets and their parallels with other ancient sources. According to the Sumerian tablets, 445,000 years ago, creator gods, as they call it, came to Earth. The only inhabitants of Earth were wild and undomesticated animals, and early ancestors of man. These beings were called the Anunnaki, which means those who from heaven to earth came. The Anunnaki inhabited a distant orbiting planet called Nibiru, which only entered our solar system every 3,600 years. They describe Nibiru as many times the diameter of Earth and abundant with iron oxide, making its rivers and lakes.
Now, think about that, right? If you remember, they said that there was some super planet, right? Nibiru was about to hit Earth. I literally remember there's seeing an article about that. See? As a matter of fact, here. Look at this. It says hypothetical planet. Now, this is from NASA. Okay? This is from NASA. NASA called it Planet X. Okay, let me pull it up here for you real quick. Because I do remember that, hearing about that as well. Now that she's mentioning it. So this from science.nasa, hypothetical planet X. Caltech researchers have found mathematical evidence suggesting that there may be a planet X deep in the solar system. This is hypothetical Neptune-sized planet orbits our sun in a highly elongated orbit far beyond Pluto. But it's supposed to be, look, may take between 10,000 and 20,000 Earth years to make one full orbit around the sun. This was supposedly the, like I said, planet Nibiru. Let me look at the other articles here. Look. Scared of planet Nibiru, NASA would like to help. 3 years from now, a planet called Nibiru will collide with the Earth. That was back with 2009, of course. Now, nothing actually happened when Nibiru didn't actually collide with the Earth or anything like that. Now look at this. Watch the post. Will this mysterious shadow planet Nibiru liberate Earth? So this isn't the first time that you've heard of that planet.
Appear red. Now, a side note about Nibiru. According to the tablets, Nibiru's atmosphere began to deteriorate and become a hostile place for life, and in order to restore it, the Anunnaki needed one important element for their atmosphere: gold. Now, here are a few interesting facts. There is proof that gold nanoparticles can be used to repair our damaged ozone. It shields radiation, which explains why NASA uses gold foils in their space stations. While NASA is currently aware of 8 official planets in our solar system, there has been much speculation about the wobbly orbit of 2 planets, which points to the likely gravitational pull of a very large mass, which has yet to be discovered. Now, detection of this mass traces back decades, but in October of 2017, NASA published an article called "The Super Earth That Came Home for Dinner," stating, there are now 5 different lines of observational evidence pointing to the existence of Planet 9. If you were to remove this explanation and imagine Planet 9 does not exist, then you generate more problems than you solve. Clearly, there is potential of another planet yet to be discovered in our solar system. Now, when the Anunnaki arrived, they were capable of living lives that spanned hundreds of thousands of years. They created a mining settlement they called Eridug, Earth Station 1, in the Persian Gulf, under a leader named Enki. The tablets convey, after a kingship descended from heaven, it was in Eridug. These visitors were not alone. They brought another extraterrestrial race with them. They were called the Igigi, and they worked as their slaves. The Igigi were considered inferior. They served the Anunnaki by mining gold. As civilizations grew, the Igigi endured crushing labor. And these stories are consistent with Babylonian tablets from the 18th century BC. When the gods, manlike, bore the labor, carried the load, the gods' load was great, the toil grievous, the trouble excessive. The great Anunnaki made the Igigi undertake the toil. After many centuries, the Igigi rebelled, mistakenly believing they could overcome these oppressive masters. Their defeat almost completely annihilated their race, leaving the Anunnaki without a workforce. Unable to replace the Igigi, Nibiru's ruler, Anu, ordered his son Enki to genetically engineer a new slave race, one that was intelligent enough to perform complex work but still be subservient to the Anunnaki. His experiments are recounted in detail in Atrahasis. Many unique creatures were created. Enki finally successfully met his goal, and the result? A genetic hybrid between Earth's caveman, Homo erectus, and the Anunnaki themselves. This hybrid we call Homo sapiens. The tablets called first men the Adamu. In Hebrew, Adam means man.
So there you have it. So Adam and Eve originally started from the person Adamu, who was actually Adam. Okay? So that whole Adam and Eve story, which was pretty much made up, it even sounds like a fairy tale if you want to think about it. The whole Adam and Eve story was pretty much made up as far as the whole Adam bit the apple and everything like that, and created sin and everything. That whole thing was sort of made up as far as the creating of sin. we can get into Christianity and all that later on. Fast Life, you mentioned before about how everything was made to be science fiction. Yes, everything has been made to be science fiction. It's actually scientific fact, if you really want to break it down. Everything that they've made to be TV shows about science fiction, majority of that shit has been scientifical fact, if we're really going to be getting into it today. And as you just heard, like I said, the first man and woman, of course, were supposedly, like I said, Adam and Eve, but it wasn't the actual story that people, have been perceived to actually learn. It was actually a situation where, like I said, it was the Nephilim had rebelled against the Anunnaki, and basically we were the hybrids that were made after that rebellion to basically supersede what the Nephilim were actually doing, and the Agigi were actually doing. So the Agigi, of course, were the workers that pretty much got tired. And when we were made, we were the workers that did not get tired.
Anunnaki put the Homo sapiens to work in the mines and elsewhere in Mesopotamia. The Semitic word avad, or worship, literally means work for. Hence, early men had no choice but to worship their gods. According to the pictographs and texts, these Anunnaki, who we know lived many centuries, were giants compared to the Homo sapiens. Now, because their main purpose in life was to serve the Anunnaki, Homo sapiens were, in return, educated with social skills and academic affairs and technology. All this is abundantly clear in the tablets. The new human slaves were sterile, but as the demand for workforce increased, they were re-engineered so that they could reproduce. This later led to an overpopulation. So later, many humans were banished from the safety of their cities, giving rise to the story of the Garden of Eden and the story of banishment from paradise for procreating. As humans evolved to become more intelligent, some Anunnaki leaders bred with these humans.
So real quick, just want to pause it real quick, as you just heard. So the Adam and Eve story was actually made up, and it was pretty much because the overpopulation that happened. So if you think about the Georgia Guidestones, even says keep humanity under 500 million. So they pretty much were even trying to follow it even back then, hundreds of millions of years ago, of keeping humanity underneath a certain number. So when it started to be overpopulated, that's when they started to make that story up of the whole the reproduction got to be a little bit too high, so no procreating. That's really what that even came from right there.
The children which resulted from these forbidden unions between races were called the Nephilim, or giants of old. Tablets say that these practices enraged Enlil, the Anu leader of that time, who was also the brother of Enki. Enlil wanted to ensure no human would ever rise to power and potentially rule Nibiru. Naturally, the interbreeding increased that risk, but it was beyond his control. Human populations increased over the following millennia, only to be met with a population control plan that nature had in store. During one of its 3,600-year cycles, Nibiru's orbit created havoc on the sun and on Earth. Nibiru is also called the Destroyer in the Kolbrin, which is an ancient gospel found in Scotland that was omitted from biblical text, much like the Dead Sea Scrolls were. It reads, "Men forgot the days of the Destroyer. Only the wise know where it went, and that it shall return at the appointed time. The Destroyer, its color, bright and fierce and ever-changing, was an unstable appearance, a fierce body of flames." Though stating Nibiru usually passes without causing harm, the tablets describe one cataclysmic event which occurred when Nibiru neared Earth. It says, first, black spots appeared on the sun's surface. The Earth's magnetic field became weaker, the temperature rose, and ice caps began melting. This event we call the deluge, or the Great Flood. It also reads, "For days before the day of the deluge, the earth was rumbling, groaning, as if with pain. For nights before the calamity struck, in the heavens, Nibiru as a glowing star was seen." Well, according to the tablets, Enlil saw the oncoming disaster as an opportunity to rid the planet of humans that he deemed unworthy. He returned to Nibiru, but many Anunnaki chose to stay, instead witnessing the flooding and the destruction on the planet from their celestial boats which circled the earth. It reads, "Then there was darkness in daytime, and at night the moon as though by a monster was swallowed. The earth began to shake by a force before unknown. It was agitated. In the glow of dawn, a black cloud arose from the horizon. The morning light turned to darkness. Then the sound of a rolling thunder boomed, and lightning lit the skies. On that day, on that unforgettable day, the deluge with a roar began." At that point, the South Pole's huge ice sheets collided and fell into the ocean. This would have created tsunamis everywhere, traveling north to the gold mines in Southeast Africa. The tidal wave continued north until it reached and submerged the city of Eden, one of the first Anunnaki settlements on Earth, now located somewhere at the bottom of today's Persian Gulf. Witnessing the cataclysm, Enki, who felt sympathy for his creations, instructed his chosen ones to build boats. Among these few humans was Ziusudra, we know as Noah, and his family. A great storm with heavy rains started. The tidal wave kept sweeping the earth for 7 days until it finally came to a halt. But the heavy rains continued for 40 more days and nights. The story of the deluge is recorded in almost every civilization on our planet.
So think about it. They called it the deluge or the delusion, but it was actually the story of the 40 days and 40 nights. So see how all these biblical stories even that, were in the Bible? All of these had their own original derivative of them and what they were originally for. So when they say, oh, such and such talked to God, they were talking about talking to Enki.
Core ice samples taken from Greenland and Antarctica illustrate that at the height of the last ice age, the sea levels were 425 feet lower than they are today. And, more importantly, there is a clear indication of a rapid sea rise. After the deluge, reconstruction of a new spaceport began. The text describes how the Anunnaki made their buildings according to the position of the stars. It reads, "Let the heart of the plane, the heavens, reflect." Once Enki to this agreed, Enlil from the skies of distances took measures. Indeed, the pyramids, now questioned to be much older than originally determined, and many other ancient monuments are, in fact, aligned to the stars. When the Anunnaki finally left Earth, their influence had reached every corner of the world, from Mesopotamia to India to South America. Before they left, they gifted humanity the Sumerian civilization, which was inexplicably advanced for its time, having made a sort of a sudden appearance as a mature and highly organized culture that came out of nowhere. The Anunnaki taught the Sumerians their way of life and established monarchs. Now here's where it gets interesting. The kings would act as their emissaries on Earth and rule the people according to ancient principles. Unbeknownst to man, royal bloodlines were genetically manipulated by the Anunnaki. This would in turn explain the strong aversion by nobility to interclass breeding. Some people speculate that the Anunnaki have deceptively managed to control the Earth through this selective breeding of nobility for centuries. millennium. Others speculate that, as the tablets indicate, Nibiru may once again come close to our planet, and then the Anunnaki will return and restore rule over the slave race they created. This would explain the secrecy around the Sumerian recorded history.
Not only that, it explains the whole, like I said, the whole thing about them trying to make Nibiru and Planet X look like it doesn't exist or like it's some conspiracy theory. Nibiru was actually the planet of the Anunnaki. So, like I said, in past life, like I said, the same thing we've been saying. Science fiction is actually scientific fact. All these things that they made to make us believe doesn't actually exist or isn't real is actually, way more imminent than you and me could even fathom about. But it makes even more sense to why they're saying that Nibiru is a fake planet, or it's just Planet X, or it's unknown, or it's just some conspiracy theory, because they don't want you to actually know what the actual definition of that planet actually is, or where the origin of that planet is, who's on that planet. They don't want you to know any of that information, because God forbid, the pun on all pun intended there, God forbid for them that you actually turn to your original gods and realize where you came from and start to see people for what they actually are. And what I mean by people for what they actually are is humanoids are actually among us. Okay, so there's this thing where people were saying, oh, the lizard people or reptilians or actually our politicians and reptilians are who run the world and things like that, right? Reptilian this, reptilian that, everybody's a reptilian, right? So even that was said to be conspiracy theory. So we just broke down how the Anunnaki pretty much debunks majority of those conspiracy theories, as well as it debunks majority of the Bible. If you look at the story of the Anunnaki, as we just heard, right? So